Perfecting and Reforming Personal Religion, Chapter 17, breakdown entitled True Living Devotion. And just as this title says, True Living Devotion, so this chapter relates that fact and blatantly. This chapter is blatantly open, ridiculously open, and it can be because the previous chapters have been building up to this point. The previous chapters giving context and putting the context of words and of phrases and of definitions into place and making sense of all of those all at once, slowly and patiently through those previous 16 chapters. The 17th chapter hits, and it hits for real, exactly where it needs to. The previous chapter ended on the thought of the conversation that has the Son has life. Now, understanding that to the Bible, the word life or the illustration of life isn't, leading one to think on natural life. Life to the Bible is defined as wisdom. The Bible defines life as wisdom. Example is in Ecclesiastes chapter 7. All throughout the Bible, life is defined as wisdom. And if one has the Son, one has wisdom. Now, this is letting us know that the one with wisdom, having that Son is not a literal figure or should not be thought of a literal personage or anything that can do anything contrary to the experience that only wisdom can give. Wisdom can only be given through a mental or inward experience. This allows us to understand that the Son that the individual has is a mental or an inward experience. So this is everything that this book has been establishing thus far. Not said as blatantly as in this 17th chapter, but laying down building blocks to build up the code that the Bible is. One having the Son does not mean that one has a demigod in favor for them. Does not mean that one has a demigod on their side, or a personage or a figure. What that means is that Son giving life, and life actually meaning wisdom. That Son is actually a giver of wisdom, and again, only one thing can give wisdom, and that is wisdom. That is thought, and that experience within. And that's what chapter 17 is about, and absolutely perfectly. True living devotion. This chapter articulates, and it begins by articulating a couple of verses that have been previously mentioned, but review and enlarge is how this book works. Review and enlarge. And so the chapter opens with the verses, live according to God in the Spirit, and then jumping to John, referencing the true worshipers doing so in spirit and in truth. And so true and living devotion has to do with this. Anything outside of this, it doesn't really fall into what is true and genuine reverence for the living God's devotional character. Entering into the new covenant promise, we are entering into a promise that is fulfilled within the spirit of the mind. It is fulfilled by the living God's righteousness, which righteousness is a service occurring to the spirit of the mind. Paragraph 2 of chapter 17 blatantly advises and states the fact that the individual perfecting and reforming their personal religion will not depend on the structure of a church nor the imagination of their conversation's heart. At this point, reading that should be no surprise. because the previous chapters establishing the manner in which the Bible would have the individual carry their conversation, this justifies what is already plain thought. If the Bible is asking the conversation to withdraw itself from its thoughts and from its beliefs and from its opinions, if the Bible is asking the conversation to regenerate the spirit of its mind, then that conversation should know that they do not belong any longer associated with what is not doing that for them, and with what will not do that for them personally. The Bible is asking for intimacy with itself. Our conversation is supposed to be intimate with the words of the Bible. Our conversation is supposed to be intimate with the experience given by and from those words. And so paragraph 2 blatantly saying, again, that the reformer will not depend on the structure of a church, nor the imagination of their heart. At this point in time, it is common knowledge. According to the navigation of this book's narration, common knowledge. And it's, according to the Bible, right perception. Though hard to hear, may be hard to hear, may be hard to embrace, there is a reality within the scriptures that the previous chapters have been bringing out, and this is and should be no surprise. And this allows the reader to then move on to the third paragraph, which exposes the meaning of honoring the living God in spirit and in truth as meaning to maintain the conversation by a renewed understanding. Again, this is blatant, should be no surprise. This is everything that has been said previously, but these opening paragraphs are leading to a major hit in later paragraphs within this chapter. And so now there's no need to skirt around the issue anymore. We've taken 16 chapters to skirt around it and to put together the pieces of the fabric of that skirt to have it to be able to skirt around in the first place. And now by the time we reach the 17th chapter, everything is in place. There's no need. We can say things blatantly because a community understanding, a general understanding, Bible language, it's plain. And so jumping into paragraph 4, we learn that this renewed understanding is the righteousness of God by faith of Jesus Christ, which at this point should make sense. And if it doesn't, paragraph 5 renames or reterms the righteousness of God by faith of Jesus Christ as redemption's law. Jumping to paragraph 6 re-identifies redemption's law as being an instruction, leaving the conversation perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And this is all true. This is all true. The vagueness of the Bible, when hearing the righteousness of God by faith of Jesus Christ, traditionally we have an understanding for that. But when it comes to what the Bible would mean when it's saying this, we don't know it. There is a process of decoding what this means because this is very vague. And hearing this, the righteousness of God by faith of Jesus Christ, we can take this traditionally or we can take this personally. Meaning we can invent an opinion about what this means based on our traditional religious understanding or based on what is not our traditional religious understanding. Either way, it's happening without the Bible and it should not. The previous chapters breaking down terms, righteousness, faith, Christ, Son, breaking these terms down, the vagueness of phrases fades away. And now we know that the righteousness of God is a service. We know that Christ is not alluding to a figure or to a personage or to a demigod or to a character. We know that Christ is actually referring to the name of the living God, and the name of the living God being the service of the living God. So we know that the righteousness of God by faith of Jesus Christ is simply just a phrase saying the service of the living God exercised by faith is what one's renewed understanding should be. Now, this exercising of what to take faith on is a law of redemption. This redemption is not physical. This redemption is not happening after death. This redemption is not happening before life. This redemption is happening while the heart beats. That's why it is an instruction, leaving the individual and the conversation perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And so these paragraphs, these opening paragraphs of this chapter, basically reviewing the previous 16 chapters, the eighth paragraph, jumping into the eighth paragraph, like there are no games in the first sentence of this paragraph. There are absolutely no games. Because now there's no need. And now when jumping in to the eighth paragraph, when leaving the seventh paragraph, the eighth paragraph hits the nail on the head by saying, all of this strictness and routine, the need to understand context and terms and to rightly apply them, the need to personally experience the words of the Bible. Paragraph 8 lets us know that all of this is so that the spirit of our mind can become the new ark of the covenant. Blatant. All of this is so that the spirit of our mind can become the new ark of the covenant. And then paragraph 10, adding on to this, says that the heart is to become the new stones engraved by the living God's finger. Again, paragraph 10 saying that the heart is to become the new stones engraved by the living God's finger. And again, and this is all figurative language, but it's all figurative language pointing to a concrete experience. We know that Ark of the Covenant held those tables written and engraved. Our heart is to become what was once physical. Our experience is to become what was once physical. There is a need to refresh the conversation's thoughts and feelings because there is an engraving that is supposed to take place, and that engraving taken place by the living God's finger. No literal finger is going to come down and engrave anything in us. No literal finger is going to come down and give us tables of stone. The working is inward. The hand doing the writing, these are the words that our mind reviews and puts into practice and continues to replay through trial and error until an understanding is developed. The experience is an experience where the mind becomes the vault for the instruction concerning the living God's righteousness or the living God's good pleasure. And then moving forward to paragraph 14, which lets us know that this cannot happen. This cannot happen unless the understanding we receive personally willingly aggravates our soul. This cannot happen personally, and we cannot gain the knowledge that we personally need to move forward in our devotional experience unless the aggravation of our soul is allowed to happen by what we learn and by what we experience. It is this aggravation that is key to that engraving, because that engraving takes place only through that aggravation, only through that frustration. And so moving to paragraph 18, there is advice. There is advice to maintain the conversation in newness of understanding, and that's the absolute point. Maintaining the conversation in newness of understanding is the absolute point. The Bible wants us to transition our experience from what we think we know and from what we think we've been trained to believe to actually having a belief. To actually having a genuine belief that we can rely on without needing to fall back on some sort of artistry or some sort of thing or theory or anything outside of our experience. The wisdom and the understanding that is supposed to come from within the experience is supposed to be our guide. This is how we know that the living God is a creator. This is how we know that we are a creation. And this is how we know that our experience is real and is genuine. When what we are experiencing, from putting those words into practice, begin to make more sense to us individually according to the lens that we have. There is only one understanding, yes. But there are different languages of understanding that lead to the same root of meaning. And so when it comes to our experience, when it comes to that root meaning, maintaining a newness of thought and of feeling for a refreshed understanding of what we have come across. This is the intention that the Bible would have us learn, and this is the intention the Bible would have us grow comfortable with.